Auspicious greeting. Welcome back to the core teaching class. Last class, we have started to learn about the 12 link of dependent origination, which show us the causes and conditions of how we transmigrate from this life to the next. And we said that the 12 link of dependent originations are ignorance, karmic formation or fabrication, consciousness, name and form, sixth sense organ, contact, feeling, craving, clinging, becoming, birth, aging, and death. In summary, our ignorance of the truth and our karmic formation, like the karma that we have created from the past, from our past life, give rise, or I should say our own our consciousness. And this consciousness led by our karma, like the karmic formation, take us to the parent that we have affinities to in this life. And of course, it entered the mother's womb and started to grow. And upon entering the fertilized cells, it gives rise to name and form, which refer to our body and mind. And we continue to grow and develop the six senses. And when we're born, our six sense organs start to interact with their objects and give rise to the appropriate consciousness. And together, they form a contact. And with contact, feelings would arise. And when feelings arise, it would give rise to craving. And craving would give rise to clinging, like our attachment. And then, of course, this attachment would motivate us into actions. It would motivate to grasp it as ours. And when we act upon it, we create new karma. And this is the process of becoming. The karma that we have done in this life will then take us to our next life. And of course, we'll be born again and then go through our life and then grow old and ultimately die. And then the cycle continue on. The Buddha said that this whole cycle leads us to a mass of sufferings that we have. Okay. Looking at this 12 link of dependent origination through three lifespan, or three lifetime, I should say, seem very far from us. Actually, we can also observe the 12 link of dependent origination right in this moment, or right in every moment of our daily life. It happened throughout our day. It's all within this mind. So let us first look at these factors in terms of our mind, like happening within moments. So now if you can like take out your pen and you probably want to copy down. There are a lot more material for this class. So I suggest that you take out a pen and then write it all down, or later on you might want to like draw a map for yourself. Okay. So ignorance, for the most part, it's very similar to what we have learned before. Ignorance is basically not seeing truth, the true realities. And the most important thing is not seeing things in terms of the Four Noble Truth. And we have learned about the Four Noble Truth in the second class, and they are sufferings, the causes of sufferings, the cessation of sufferings, and the path to cessation of sufferings. And so when we're ignorant, we're not seeing things in terms of that. And for karmic formation, or another translation, it's fabrication. It's basically the process of intentionally shaping the state of body and mind. And of course, like what we have learned before, fabrication, there are three types of fabrication. So for bodily fabrication, it's really about our breathing, the in and out of breathing. And for verbal fabrication, it's actually direct thoughts and evaluation. And we might wonder, okay, so why that is? I was looking through the sutras. Actually, in one of the sutras, the Buddha did mention that. So for direct thoughts and evaluation will lead to verbal fabrication. So that's why we can also refer verbal fabrication to, like we can refer direct thoughts and evaluation as verbal fabrication. And last is the mental fabrication. It's basically about feelings and perception. And for those of you who didn't know what perception means, I guess in terms of Buddhism, it's really about the mental labels that we apply to various things. So basically, it's the label that we give it. For example, you're looking at me right now, and the label you probably give is Venerable Zixing, since that's how I introduce myself. And so basically, perception is our mental labels that we give to everything. And for consciousness, of course, it's referring to the sixth consciousness that we have based on our sixth sense. And name and form, it's still about mental and physical phenomena. So mental phenomena of ourself, it include feelings, perceptions, intention, contact, and attention. And for physical phenomena, just like what we have mentioned last class, we're composed of these four great elements: fire, water, earth, and wind, like our breathing. And the sixth sense, it's still our sixth sense organ. And contact, obviously, same as what we have learned before. Our sixth sense, it's interacting with their objects, and the associate consciousness arise. So the three of them together form the contact. Whenever there's contact, there is feelings. So there are six feelings that arise based on the contact at these six sense. And then, of course, then it gives rise to craving for the object of the sixth sense. And then with craving, it gives rise to clinging, like basically your attachment, whatever that we have passion and delight in. And clinging would give rise to becoming. So becoming at this point, it's really about like assuming this sense of identity within a world of experience. So it's the role that we're taking on. And birth is the actual assumption of that identity. And the aging and death of that identity is, so with the aging and death of that identity, basically there comes sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair. So this role might be a filial son, or a filial, a good student. You know, all these are our different identities in the world. And the Buddha told us that all of his teachings are about sufferings and ending of sufferings. The 12 link of dependent origination is actually his detailed explanation of the causes and conditions of why we have sufferings and stress. However, we can also end sufferings and stress within the system. The simple circle image that we use to explain about the 12 link of dependent origination, like the one that I've shown before, it's only a simplified version of the system. It's actually way more complex than that. That's why in one of the sutras, the Buddha said that the dependent origination is like a tangled skin, just like what you're seeing in the image here. So it's very complicated. And in other words, we can also describe dependent origination as being like a non-linear complex system. So before, when we learned the last class, it's sort of linear. I go from ignorance to karmic formation, and then it go in this whole sequence to birth and old age and death, and then ignorance again. So it's linear at the time when we first learn it. But then as we learn more about it, it's actually a non-linear complex system. And it's sort of like this. This is like a system that describes climate, energy, and water. And so you can see that there is a lot of feedbacks, loops, and stuff. And so basically our 12 link of dependent origination, it's as complex as this, or even way more complex. And we might wonder why. It seemed very straightforward. However, if we think about it, like sometimes as a just no, I should say just like what I have mentioned before, 12 link of dependent origination is happening to us throughout the day. And sometimes it doesn't go in complete sequence and then start the whole sequence again. Sometimes there will be feedback loops. For example, we see these donuts in front of us and we love to eat donuts, so pleasant feelings arise and we crave to eat it. However, giving it appropriate attention and we think more about it and we remind ourselves that no, I'm on diet and I have maybe high blood sugar, so I should not be eating it. So you start to have some restraint on yourself. So far, with these thoughts, no action is taken yet. However, you think more about how you love to eat it, how great it feels when you eat the donut, and it starts to like swing you back toward stronger craving that might motivate you into actions. So our mind might go back and forth, arguing with itself to see whether we should satisfy this craving or just restrain ourselves. And of course, if the craving is very strong, then we will then take actions, grab the donut, and start to eat it. And so from this, we can see that these factors, all these mental factors, might loop back to other factors within the sequence. And one thing we should know is that we can adjust the parameter affecting the system to a certain value to achieve our desired effects in a non-linear complex system. Similarly, the Buddha taught us dependent originations to show us that how all these factors can be manipulated to lead to the end of sufferings. A better image would be to view dependent origination as a complex interplay of many feedback loops that, if approached with ignorance, can produce compounded sufferings. Or if we approach it with knowledge, then it would create repeated opportunities to redirect the sequence. And of course, it would dampen the experience of sufferings and stress. And from this, we can see that ignorance is the primary cause of sufferings, and knowledge, on the other hand, is the primary factors leading to the cessation of sufferings. Therefore, the primary parameter to help collapse the system lies in whether we are having this knowledge or not. Of course, it then begs the question of what knowledge is needed. And of course, this go back to the Four Noble Truths: sufferings, causes of sufferings, cessation of sufferings, and the path to cessation of sufferings. And however, we need to know that the Four Noble Truths, they're not just knowledge, but they're actually important skills that we need to master. Remember, the Buddha told us we need to accomplish these four tasks. He said that sufferings are to be comprehended, causes of sufferings are to be abandoned, cessation of sufferings is to be realized, path to cessation of sufferings is to be developed. So these four skills are the one that we need to master. So we should not just view them as knowledge, but are something that we need to work on and accomplish in the end. And once we have mastered these skills, like fully mastered them, we have developed the knowledge that would put a total end to the ignorance underlying all the other factors and dependent originations. We should train ourselves to view any or all of our experiences and the 12 link independent originations in terms of the Four Noble Truths. Instead of looking at an experience, for instance, in terms of self and others, of what your true nature is, or of what you like and dislike, you look at it in terms of where there's stress, what's causing it, how to put an end to that cause. Viewing the 12 factors simply as process and event is an important skills in learning how to see them in terms of the Four Noble Truth. So what I'm saying here is that like for the 12 link of dependent origination, or simply all the experiences that we have, we shouldn't view them in terms of the self, like this I, whether I like it or not, but more like view it just very objectively, like their event and their process. And of course, we want to categorize them to see whether they are causing us sufferings or they are the causes of sufferings, and how we can end it, and so on. And always remember that the Four Noble Truths are skills to be mastered. When the skills appropriate to the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the path to cessation of sufferings, are constantly and masterfully applied to dependent origination, they can cause the entire system of sufferings and its causes to collapse. So far, it seemed like, oh, it's a lot of work. How do I apply the Eightfold Noble Path and viewing everything as the Four Noble Truth with this dependent origination? But what we need to remember is that we don't need to tackle all 12 factors, because we can end sufferings through focusing on any one of the factors. If you remembered what we have studied before, the 12 link of dependent origination, they are sort of like causes and effects. So there need to be a requisite conditions before it would give rise to the next conditions. However, the cessation of one conditions, it will also lead to the cessation of another conditions. So a person merely need to focus on a particular factors or relationship within the sequence, whichever is easier for us, and apply knowledge in terms of the Four Noble Truth to that spot. And once this factor ceased, the other will cease, just like the domino effects. This also tells us that we can actually break the cycle at any of the 12 link of dependent origination. So today, we're going to talk about how to break through from the cycle. And obviously, our goal is to end all the sufferings or stress that we have. Now, let us look at the 12 link of dependent origination again. Technically, we can break the cycle at any of the point because each factors is actually a requisite conditions for the next factors. However, if we look at it, some factors are easier to work with as compared to others. Ignorance would probably not be a good choice because we have been ignorant of the truth since the undiscoverable beginning. So it is very hard to change it to insight right away. After all, this is not like turning on the light or turning it off with a light switch. So it does take a lot of time. And if we think about it, the psychologist told us that if we want to change a bad habit to a new behavioral habit, it takes 21 days of performing the new behavioral habit in order for us to change it. So if it takes almost a month to correct a behavioral habit, think about mental habit. It probably take way longer, especially since we have this ignorance for who knows how long we have it for. Therefore, to realize the truth and see the world with clarity would definitely take a long time with lots of effort. Also, this required us to master the Four Noble Truths. Thus, it probably won't be a good point to start. Although we definitely need to have the right view, like the Four Noble Truths in mind all the time. But just focusing at the ignorance might be a little bit hard to work with. So also, if we look at becoming like the karma has already been performed, like we have already like performed these karma, or we have already assumed these identity. So it's probably very hard as well. And through the process of elimination, a better place that we might choose from might be the sixth sense, feeling, craving, and clinging. But craving is a very strong force. So by then, it is actually very hard for us to control and try to contain this craving. Normally, craving is already like motivating us into actions, or it might become a stronger attachment. So it might has become clinging already. This is sort of like, if we think about it, sort of like, okay, we're talking to our colleague about a project and we come to a different opinion. And as we continue to talk, like it become an argument. So I start to feel very angry about the fact that he refused to listen to my suggestion. And obviously he's also getting angry as well. And so at the point, if I become very angry, do you think I can still maintain control and cultivate? A lot of time, if we have not trained our mind before, at the moment, I probably act upon my emotion and blurb out the first thing on my mind, which I might regret later, right? So when it has become a craving, like the strong aversion or the strong anger, and then I'm clinging to my view, thinking that I'm correct and you're wrong, then it's very hard to make this change at the time, to be able to continue to view it with clarity and make the right actions and also the right speech. So that might be a very hard spot to work with. And sixth sense organ, or the six senses, I should say, is one of the good place to start. The Buddha did in one of the sutras teaches us to guard our sixth sense. There's actually a story or a conversation between the Buddha and his disciple. And so this is how it goes. So once the Buddha was walking along a river with a disciple. So across the river, they saw a turtle slowly crawling up on the riverbank. A hungry fox came over to the turtle and tried to eat the turtle because it is very hungry. And when the turtle sensed the dangers, it quickly hid its head, tails, and the forelimb back inside the shell. The fox tried it to eat the turtle, but it couldn't because the turtle was hidden inside the shell. After some time, the fox gave up and ran off. The turtle then moved back to what it's doing after the fox left. It is this time when the Buddha said to his disciple, "The people of this world are no match for this turtle." When the turtle is confronted with danger, he knew to retract his tail, his head, and legs. However, worldly people are completely unaware that impermanence, a murderous ghost, is constantly watching them, wanting to seize their lives. Instead, they willfully indulge their sixth sense of eyes, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind in pursuing the sixth external sense object of form, sound, sense, taste, touch, and phenomena. In turn, they perform all kinds of evil deeds and give the demon of vexation, death, and sickness opportunities to take advantage of them. In this way, they're driven by their karma, endlessly transmigrating within the sixth realm and suffering from all kinds of adversities. This is entirely due to their inability to master their own mind, giving rise to their continuous sufferings in the cycle of life and death. In this parable, the Buddha taught the disciple to guard its sixth sense, just like the turtle, and not allow ourselves to indulge in the sixth sense with their objects. We can try to guard our sixth sense organ. However, we also relied on them to interact with our surrounding. So when the sixth sense interact with their surrounding, contact would arise, and obviously when there's contact, there's feelings. We can't just seclude ourselves in the mountain. because this is not correct either. So also, if we look back at the parable, the Buddha said that we continue to suffer in the cycle of life and death because of our inabilities to master our mind. So sometimes guarding our sixth sense might be hard as well. But it is one of a good place to work with as well, because if we can guard it well, like not seeing what we're not supposed to see, not listening to what we're not supposed to listen, like gossip, then basically we would have less afflictions and so on. Therefore, after analyzing all these different places, points, feeling is probably one of the best place to work with to break through from the cycle. When we can end at feelings, then craving will not arise. Okay. If craving didn't arise, clinging will not arise. And if clinging will not arise, then there will be no becoming. And without becoming, there won't be birth. And the rest of the cycle would also cease to be. Just like the domino effects. So when one condition ceases to be, the rest will cease to be as well. When we speak of cutting dependent origination at one of its link, such as this link between feelings and craving, what is actually happening is that full knowledge with regard to that link has replaced ignorance with regard to that link. So we're seeing that we're, instead of being ignorant, because a lot of time due to our ignorance, we will just continue through the cycle. However, now that we are able to view everything in regard to the Four Noble Truth and ultimately master these skills, then we're able to replace this ignorance, and because of that, we would be able to cut off this link. So when with the ceasing of ignorance, fabrication ceases, and so cessation cascades throughout the entire sequence. So let us look at how we can discern feelings in terms of the Four Noble Truth. And so let us look at the sutras. Venerable Sariputra said, "And what is feelings? What is the originations of feelings? What is the cessation of feelings? What is the way of practice leading to the cessation of feelings?" Okay, so there are these 6 feelings. Feeling born from eye contact, feeling born from ear contact, feeling born from nose contact, feeling born from tongue contact, feeling born from body contact, feeling born from intellect contact. This is called feelings. So from this paragraph, we can see that feelings arose from these 6 sense contact. Let us continue with the sutras. From the origination of contact comes the originations of feelings. From the cessation of contact comes the cessation of feelings. And the way of practice leading to cessation of feelings is just this very noble eightfold path: right view, right resolve, right speech, right actions, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentrations. So again, here you go. The way leading to the cessation of feelings is the Noble Eightfold Path. So when we view the feelings in terms of the Four Noble Truths, so the path leading to cessation of sufferings is the Noble Eightfold Path. And so the cessation of feelings here is when we fully understand feelings as it is. Because we understand it, we comprehend it, we're disenchanted by it, and therefore it doesn't further give rise to craving or aversion. Now, when a disciple of the Noble One discerns feelings the originations of feelings, the cessation of feelings, and the way of practice leading to the cessation of feelings in this way, when, having entirely abandoned passion obsessions, having abolished aversion obsessions, having uproot the view and conceit obsessions, I am, having abandoned ignorance and give rise to clear knowing, he has put an end to sufferings and stress right in the here and now. It is to this extent, too, that a disciple of the noble ones is a person of right view, one whose view is made straight, who is endowed with verified confidence in the Dharma, and who has arrived at this true Dharma. So when we reach the cessation of feelings through the practice, like through the Noble Eightfold Path, we have abandoned craving, aversion, and give rise to clear knowing of the Dharma. Like, because we truly understand, comprehends what feeling is and how it causes sufferings. So that's why we can abandon these passion obsessions or aversion obsession and so on. And because we truly comprehend it, and it slowly gives rise to this clear knowing. And of course, by then we're replacing our ignorance with our knowledge. And when a person has this right view, this noble person is one who has really arrived at this true Dharma, like really understand, realize this true Dharma. So keeping the right view in mind, we will need to practice like right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration to help us really understand what feeling is, how it can lead to sufferings, and just observe it as it is until we truly discern feelings and sees the link between feelings and craving. But we have to understand that this is a gradual process. So again, this is not like turning on and off the light switch. It doesn't work that way. It does take time. So it's a gradual process that we have to work with. Before going into how we can break this link between feelings and craving, we will need to first understand the process we have when our sixth sense create a contact with the associate objects. So from understanding this, we can sort of know how we can work with feelings. So according to the sutras of the ball of honey, the Buddha said, dependent on I and form, I consciousness arise. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as a requisite conditions, there is feelings. When one feels, one perceive, like label in the mind. What one perceive, one think about. What one think about, one objectify. Based on what a person objectified, the perceptions and categories of objectification assailed him or her with regard to past, present, and future forms cognizable through the eyes. So basically, in this passage, the Buddha gave one example of eye contact and how from eye contact we start to perceive what we're seeing in front of us. And so according to the sutras, when our sixth sense interact with their objects and give rise to the associate consciousness, contact would arise. When there's contact, obviously feelings would arise. When feelings arise, perception would arise. When we perceive, we think about. When objectification arise, perceptions and category of objectification would arise. The word objectification here is a translation from the Pali's word papancha. We can also call it conceptual proliferation. It's the tendencies of the mind to proliferate issues from the sense of self. This term can also be translated as self-reflexive thinking, falsifications, distortion, elaboration, or exaggerations. Papancha is the tendencies of the mind to spread out from and elaborate upon any sense object that arise in experience. It's basically mental elaboration. Basically, our mind just go on and on what it's thinking in regard to this object. Or we can also understand it as most of these thoughts, which are illusory, repetitive, and even obsessive. And third, it effectively blocks any sort of mental calm and clarity of mind. So basically, when we objectify something, we're having this mental elaboration about that object, thinking a lot about it. So what are these perceptions and categories that assail the person who objectified? The root of it is the perceptions of I'm the thinker. With these perceptions, the feelings that arise is to our liking. We would want to seize the objects. However, if it doesn't appeal to us, we would want to push them away. So let us look at this diagram to help make it more clear. The sense organ interact with the sense object and their associate sense consciousness arise. The sense consciousness at this point does not recognize object. It is only a kind of awareness of the presence of the object. This is called contact. So the three of them together create this contact. So at this point of contact, it doesn't recognize the object yet. And then when contact arises, feelings would arise, whether it's pleasant feelings, unpleasant feelings, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant feelings. And then perceptions would also arise conditioned to the feelings. This is where the recognitions of the object take place, because remember, the nature of perceptions involve recognizing, noting, and generalizing different characteristics of the things, and to express things seen, heard, conceived, or those that one recall. So remember the definition we give it, it's like the mental labels that we give to the various objects. So the mind is able to compare the present perceptions with a similar one recollected from the past. For example, when our eyes see the table, perceptions will label that piece of furniture with a flat top and four legs as table. If past memory had the data of table, perception will recall it. The mind will then compare the present table with the table that's recollected from the past. Up to this point, the phases belong to the first receptive state of mind that involve both aspects of attentions and memories, which is expressed by the word mindfulness in Buddhism. This attention is the so-called bare attentions that presented the bare fact of a perception through the sense object. So at this point, there's no discrimination. It's purely pulling our labels out and knowing what's in front of us. So there's no discrimination against it. However, this state is very short and it's actually very hard to observe. At this state, everything is still very objective. So at the first receptive state of mind, the things that we see and identify, they are still very objective. The second stage is the cognition stage, based on the subjective judgment of observer. So the perception formed in the second stage is always distorted. So this is where the distorted sense of I also come in, like this is mine and so on. The developed perceptions are usually associated with emotional and intellectual bias, abstract thinking, wrong understanding of the real existence of I, and the delusions of permanent substantial of things when the desires take place and play its functions. The wrong perceptions will be memorized and kept as storage data for future analysis and judgment. The misconception will exert its distorted influence when the past memory recalled on future perceptions of similar objects. This is sort of like I got a very bad impressions of this person I met due to a misunderstanding. So I store this piece of information back to my mind, and the next time when I see this person again, my mind will pull out this biased, distorted memories of this person that I had of her when I first met her. And then I would already have this prejudice against her as we're working together. And obviously, based on the situation then, like more memories would get stored back about this person. Now that we have an idea of how we think, and it then pulls us back to the questions of why do we choose to break the cycle at feelings? So in one of the sutras, the Buddha said, because of I have known as they really are the feelings, their origin, cessation and path, the gratification of feelings, the danger in feelings, and the escaping from them, I have liberated out of birth and death, freed from perversion, and obtained perfect enlightenment in this world. With its devas, Mara, Brahma, ascetic Brahmin, devas, and human. So the sutras tell us that if we really understand feelings and see them as they truly are, we can be free from sufferings. For those who have not trained their mind, the powerful feelings may drag us into various unwholesome mental factors such as craving, aversion, depressions, jealousies, stress, arrogance, wrong view, and so forth. When we have pleasant feelings, it will lead to craving. When we crave something, we become attached to it. Then we act upon our craving and attachment. And when we have unpleasant feelings, it will lead to aversion. If we can just become aware of the feelings without reacting to it, we won't have desires or this craving or aversion. And of course, then there will be no resulting actions afterward. So feeling dependent on sense contact, we have to remember that it's sort of neutral in their primary state. So it is very objective at the moment. It provides the realities of the sense impressions. If we can then observe feelings with appropriate attention, viewing it as an event or process in terms of the affordable truth, feelings will not develop to craving and clinging. Then the rest of the sequence in the 12th link of dependent origination will then collapse. Since mainly because there's no requisite conditions to give rise to the rest of the factors. If we can observe feelings with appropriate attentions, see that it is impermanent, see that it is selfless, then our tendencies toward craving will dissolve naturally. We would be able to make a choice on how we want to react when the feelings arise. We can continue to turn it to craving and sufferings. Or we can choose to let go and let it be and be free from sufferings. So if we're mindful at the moment, then we have this choice. If we just want to follow it and act upon it, or if we want to just let go and then be free from sufferings. The next questions we will have is how do we train ourselves to be mindful of our feelings, to be able to observe our feelings with appropriate attentions? For that, we need to practice the right mindfulness. In the sutras of analysis of mental faculties, the Buddha said, and what is the faculties of mindfulness? There is the case where a monk, a disciple of the noble ones, is mindful, highly meticulous, remembering and able to recall to mind even things that were done and said long ago. And here, of course, it begin the Satipatthana formula. Here remain focus on the body in and of itself, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. He remained focused on feelings in and of themselves and the mind in and of themselves, mental qualities in and of themselves, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. And before we go on, we should first look at what does it mean by mindful, ardent, and alert. So mindfulness is about keeping that object of your attention in mind and remembering about it over time. So modern psychological research has shown that attention comes in discrete moment. You can be attentive to something for only a very short period of time, and then you have to remind yourself moment after moment to return to it if you want to keep on being attentive. Mindfulness helps remind us to keep that object of attention in mind over time. Bare attention is an aspect of mindfulness that arises before any conceptualization or idealization begins to play its function. It is a pure awareness that observes things as they really are without prejudice and judgment by observer. So a basic summary is that mindfulness it's this ability to remember, to keep this object of attention in mind. Alertness is being aware of what you're doing in the movement of body and movement of the mind. Aware of it every single moment, like a cat trying to observe the movement of a mouse. We should observe the mind like a cat observing its prey. And we want to end sufferings. We want to know what we're doing with our body and mind. So for alertness, it's really about being aware every single moment. And last, utterancy. Utterancy is being intent on what you're doing and trying your best to do it skillfully. So the focus of mindfulness, ardencies, and alertness is appropriate attentions. Buddha discovered that for us, the way we attend to things depend on what we see as important. This is why it's important for us to know why we want to practice the Dharma, what is the goal that we want to reach, and what is the problem that we want to practice to resolve. The biggest problem for us is that sufferings arise because we act in ignorance. We want to find a way out of sufferings. This is why we need to keep the issues of sufferings and its end always in our mind. So in another word, we should always keep the Four Noble Truths in our mind. And if we understand this, it makes sense why right view, it's the first forerunner in the Noble Eightfold Path. We should always have this Four Noble Truth in our mind. And obviously our desires to for answers to these questions, like our desires to end sufferings, is what make us alert to our actions, speech, and thoughts, and adorn to perform them skillfully. Mindfulness is what keeps the perspective of appropriate attentions in mind. So how do we train ourselves to be mindful, alert, and adorn? And the obvious answer is we need to practice meditation. This is why meditation is a very important Buddhist practice. It is a tool that would help us train our mind. One of the meditation practice that the Buddha taught us is the four foundations of mindfulness, which would lead to detachment and liberation. The four objects of mindfulness are body, feelings, mind, and dharma, or all the phenomena. We contemplate and observe the body, feelings, mind, and phenomena as they truly are. These phenomena are most of the time it's referring to all these mental factors we have inside. For us though, our main focus is this contemplation of feelings. We should know that our feelings are changing all the time. So we should observe our feelings as they arise and as they disappear. And observe feeling as they are, like sort of like an event or process, not viewing them in terms of associating with the sense of I. So in the Satipatthana Sutras, it lead us to contemplate feelings when it's arise. So here are some of the questions that we can ask ourselves. Okay, is it pleasant feelings? Is it painful feelings? Is it neither pleasant nor painful feelings? Is this a painful feelings of the flesh, like from our body? Painful feelings not of the flesh, or maybe it's not from our body? Pleasant feelings of the flesh? Or is it pleasant feelings not from the flesh, not from the body? Or is it neither pleasant nor painful feelings of flesh? So basically, you're not feeling, for your bodily feelings, you're not feelings pleasant nor unpleasant. So is it neither pleasant nor painful feelings not of the flesh? So these are some of the questions that we ask ourselves. So we truly observe feelings that arise as they are in terms of a process, and also in terms of the Four Noble Truths. So to sum up, in our daily life, we should observe any of the feelings that arise without judging it, and understand the causes and conditions that give rise to the feelings. Then accept that it is there and continue to be very mindful of them. You should just notice that it would also disappear. So these feelings arise and they would also feelings. They're not permanent. So right now you might be feeling very depressed, but it would not always be, because feelings is also changing all the time. And if we're able to just observe, understand, and accept it without further reactions, we would be able to stop the craving and clinging that follow. Don't aim at getting rid of any feelings, but to just stay in the present moment. Just know it, see it, and understand how it come about, how it disappeared based on whatever experience that arises. Just seeing it as a process or an event. There is no self that is running thing, but only nature moving according to causes and effects. One would easily let go and prevent from latent tendencies of immediate reactions that worsen the situation. So if we can just observe the feelings that arise, then we would be able to make a choice of whether we want to act upon our feelings and maybe do things or say things that we regret, or we can make better decisions into proper, like performing proper actions and speech. And we should treat it sort of like watching a movies, standing at a third person point of view when looking at all these that are going in our mind. For example, you see that your colleagues are looking at you and laugh, and then obviously when we see our colleagues laughing at us and pointing at us, we might probably think, are they laughing at me or talking behind my back? And then obviously anger would arise. And so at this point, when we notice anger arise, then we should take a step back and just observe this anger and then ask ourselves, okay, so where is anger before we see our colleagues or before we hear their laughter? Don't just jump into anger and then like rush toward your colleagues and say, are you laughing at me? Don't do that, but just observe, and then help yourself change perspective. So once the vanishing point of feelings is observed repeatedly with increasing clarity, the underlying tendencies toward craving will be dissolved naturally. As the mind perceives the nature of impermanence and selflessness of feelings, all emotions, thoughts, and habitual actions will slow down and cease at the point of feelings. Thus, clear comprehension is able to function well, deciding the right actions of body, speech, and thoughts. So, to conclude, practice meditation and contemplate upon your feelings. Then, be mindful of your feelings, but do not react to them. Just know that, oh, they're pleasant or unpleasant, or neither pleasant or unpleasant feelings. And then when you notice the various feelings that arise upon context, do not react to these feelings right away. As most venerable Simbao told us, we should learn to be half a beat slower in our emotions, or in our reactions, I should say. In this way, we won't act upon our impulse or on our emotions. Once we continue to be mindful of our feelings, we can learn to stop or slow down the arising of desires and anger. Also, because we're aware of our feelings, we get to make a choice to do good deeds, say good word, and of course, think good thoughts. Through contemplating and observing our feelings, we would also gain insight on the true realities, and also understand life as it is. In this way, we would have a carefree and happy life. Thus, I hope that every one of you, and or I should say every one of us, can take time to practice meditation and start to train ourselves to be more mindful of our feelings. And this is the place that we can start to, I guess I would say, start to decrease the amount of afflictions or stress or sufferings that we have, and ultimately one day we'll be liberated from them. So last but not least, thank you for listening to this class. Please take care and stay safe. 弥陀佛。